before the beginning. Have you ever wondered if the story we've always heard about the creation of the world might be missing something? That maybe, just maybe, between the first two verses of Genesis, a mystery has been hiding in plain sight, a story of light rebellion and redemption written before the first human ever took a breath. This isn't about rewriting the Bible. It's about looking deeper, between the lines, into the silence, where the echoes of eternity still whisper the truth of what once was. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Simple, profound, perfect. But then the next line says, the earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. Wait, how can something made by a perfect creator be formless and empty? Could there be a gap, not just a time, but a story? Imagine this for a moment. Before Adam, before Eden, before time as we know it began ticking forward, there was another world, a radiant, glorious creation, ruled by light and harmony. And at its center stood one of God's most magnificent beings, an archangel whose beauty reflected heaven itself. His name was Lucifer, and once he was perfect. We often picture the universe starting with chaos, slowly becoming order. But what if it began the other way around? What if order came first, then fell into chaos? Because somewhere between God created and the earth was without form, something happened. Something so devastating that it left creation shattered, silent, and covered in darkness. Some scholars call the gap a space between two verses that may hold an eternity of forgotten history. Not a myth, not a fantasy, but a possibility hinted in the scriptures themselves. A hidden moment when light fell, angels wept, and the first war in the cosmos began. Close your eyes and picture it. A world once filled with life and beauty. Oceans sparkling under the light of heaven. Mountains singing with glory. Creatures moving in perfect rhythm to the Creator's heartbeat. And then rebellion. Lucifer, once the morning star, looked at his reflection and saw not gratitude, but pride. I will ascend, he whispered. I will rise above the stars. I will make myself like the Most High. That single thought cracked heaven's harmony. And from that moment, everything changed. The skies trembled. The angels divided. And light, pure, holy light, was torn by shadow. What came next wasn't creation. It was destruction. Lucifer's rebellion unleashed judgment. The earth, once radiant, became void. Darkness smothered the waters. The heavens grew silent. And for a time, it seemed as if light itself had died. But even in that silence, something moved. Something hovered, softly, patiently, over the waters of ruin. The Spirit of God moved upon the face of the deep. Like a gentle dove, the Spirit waited, ready to breathe life again into what had been lost. Because that's what God does. He takes what is broken, what is formless and void, and he begins again. This is not only the story of Genesis. It is the story of redemption itself. Think about it. From the ashes of rebellion came restoration. From darkness, light. From chaos, order. And from death, life. Maybe that's why Genesis starts the way it does. Because before God began to create, he had already redeemed. Before man sinned, he had already saved. And before the world fell into darkness, he had already spoken the words that would change everything. Let there be light. And that's where our story begins. Not with the birth of the universe, but with the return of light after judgment. A light that didn't just illuminate creation. It symbolized hope, mercy, and the endless grace of God who never gives up on what he loves. But to understand what really happened in the beginning, we have to go back to that mysterious space between verse 1 and verse 2, to the war that shattered heaven's harmony, to the fall of Lucifer, and the day the earth became a wasteland beneath divine judgment. Because in that lost chapter of eternity lies the key to understanding why God created again and what he was preparing for you and me even before time began. So join me as we look in the forgotten dawn of creation, the rebellion that reshaped the cosmos, and the mercy that brought light back into a broken world. This is the untold story before the beginning. Before Adam walked the earth, before the first sunrise, there was a war in heaven, and its echoes still shape our world today. The rebellion before time. Before Adam ever breathed, before there was a garden called Eden, before the first sunrise warmed the face of the earth. There was glory, a glory so vast, so radiant, that words can barely touch it. The heavens sang. The stars shimmered in perfect harmony with their Creator. And among the multitude of heavenly beings, one stood above the rest, a being of stunning brilliance, entrusted with beauty, wisdom, and light. His name was Lucifer, the shining one, the morning star. He wasn't created evil. He was created to reflect the splendor of God himself, to be a mirror of divine perfection. Scripture says, "You were the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. Every precious stone was your covering." Lucifer's radiance wasn't just external. He was designed to carry the music of heaven itself. Many ancient texts suggest he was the anointed guardian cherub, standing upon the holy mountain of God, leading worship before the Almighty's throne. But somewhere between worship and wonder, something shifted. He began to look upon his reflection, not to glorify the Creator, but to admire himself. He saw his own brilliance and thought, why should the glory stop with him? Why not me? And that single whisper of pride, that seed of self, became the spark that ignited the first war ever fought. Heaven had never known rebellion before. There was no concept of disobedience, no precedent for betrayal. Yet one thought, I will, tore through eternity like lightning. I will ascend into heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit upon the mount of assembly. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. 5 declarations, 5 acts of defiance, 5 strikes of pride that shattered heaven's harmony. The angels who heard him stood in disbelief. Could the one who once led songs of praise now speak words of revolt? But pride is persuasive, and beauty can blind. One by one, hearts turned. A third of the host of heaven aligned with the light-bearer, who had now become the shadow of his own name. And the heavens, once filled with worship, trembled with war. Michael, the archangel of God's armies, rose against Lucifer's rebellion. Light clashed with darkness. Thunder rolled across eternity. The stars shook in their places. And when it was over, Scripture tells us there was no longer any place for them in heaven. The great dragon was cast down, that ancient serpent called the devil and Satan. When Lucifer fell, so did his kingdom. The radiant order that once existed in the heavens was ripped apart, and the domain once under his guardianship, the earth, bore the scars of divine judgment. Darkness swallowed light. Waters flooded the deep. Mountains crumbled. The earth became formless and void. This was not how it was in the beginning. God does not create chaos. He brings peace. What we see in Genesis 1 verse 2 is not creation in progress. It is creation in ruins. The Spirit of God hovered over the waters not as an artist beginning his work, but as a Redeemer preparing to restore what had been lost. Let's pause here. If this sounds unfamiliar, it's because most of us have only heard the story starting with Adam. But the Bible, when read closely, hints at something much deeper, a cosmic history between verse 1 and verse 2. Isaiah 14, Ezekiel 28, Jeremiah 4. Each offers glimpses of a world destroyed, a judgment executed, and a rebellion quenched. Jeremiah described it this way: I looked on the earth, and behold, it was without form and void, and the heavens, and they had no light. Does that sound familiar? It mirrors the second verse of Genesis. But Jeremiah wasn't describing creation. He was describing destruction. And yet, from that destruction, hope began to stir. The Spirit hovered, waiting, moving, ready to begin again. And then the voice of God thundered into the silence. The same voice that had once cast down rebellion now spoke words of renewal. Let there be light. Light pierced the darkness, and for the first time since judgment, creation began to breathe again. But think about what that moment truly meant. God didn't have to start over. He could have left the void as it was, silent, lifeless, forgotten. Yet he chose to redeem. He chose to bring beauty from ashes, order from chaos, life from death. It was more than a beginning. It was a declaration of grace. And perhaps, even then, he was already thinking of us. Because that's who God is, the one who restores what's been lost. As the days unfolded, his power rewove the fabric of creation. On the second day, the skies separated from the seas, a symbol that heaven and earth were once again being aligned. On the third day, dry land appeared, life sprouted, and the first breath of green spread across the once ruined earth. Then came the stars, the sun, the moon, placed not as new creations, but as renewed instruments of his timing and glory. Each act wasn't just a scientific step. It was a spiritual restoration. By the time the sixth day came and God formed man in his own image, something profound had happened. He didn't just create humanity to populate the earth. He entrusted them with it. Let them have dominion, he said. It was as if he was saying, once a guardian failed me. Now I will raise a new one, born of dust, yet crowned with my breath. But that ancient enemy, he hadn't vanished. Cast down, defeated, and stripped of his glory, Lucifer, now Satan, watched the new creation with burning hatred. He saw humanity walking in the light that he had lost. He saw them bearing the image he once tried to steal. And in his pride he whispered again, "If I cannot be like God, then I will destroy those who are made in his image." So the serpent slithered into the garden, not as a monster, but as a deceiver, quiet, cunning, and familiar with the art of persuasion. And with a single lie, did God really say? He set humanity on the same path of rebellion he had once walked himself. It's heartbreaking, isn't it? The same pride that once corrupted an angel now echoed in the hearts of men and women. But even in that tragedy, God's mercy was already moving. Just as the Spirit once hovered over the waters of chaos, he now hovered over a fallen race, preparing another act of redemption. Because Genesis is not only a story of beginnings, it's a story of restorations. If we look at it closely, the entire Bible follows the same pattern: creation, fall, redemption, light, darkness, light again, from the ruins of Lucifer's pride to the fall of Adam, and from there to the cross of Christ. The same God keeps doing the same thing, bringing light where there was none. Now, when we read in the beginning, it means more than the start of time. It means the renewal of hope after judgment. It reminds us that God's first act in history was not creation. It was forgiveness. He looked at a world that had fallen into chaos and said, "Let there be light." And thousands of years later, he looked at a world fallen into sin and said again, "Let there be light." This time, through his Son. Everything God does echoes through eternity. The pattern in Genesis isn't just cosmic, it's personal. Because in each of our lives, there are gap moments too. Moments between verse 1 and verse 2. Between who we were and who we become. Moments when everything feels formless, void, and dark. But even then, the Spirit still hovers, waiting to move, waiting to whisper light into the chaos. That's the beauty of this story. Even in the deepest darkness, God is never done. Transition to the final section. And so, as the story of Genesis unfolds, we begin to see not just the making of a world, but the unveiling of a divine heart, a heart that redeems, restores, and never gives up on his creation. The war in heaven, the fall of Lucifer, the ruin of the earth, and the dawn of light, all of it points to one truth. Our God is not only a creator, he is a restorer. And that, perhaps, is the most powerful message hidden between the lines of Genesis. The light that never left. When the dust of creation settled and the first sunrise touched the newborn earth, heaven must have watched in awe. What had once been a realm of chaos now glowed with promise. The darkness that had swallowed the world was forced to retreat before a single command. Let there be light. And there was light, not just a glow of a distant sun, but the radiance of restoration, of divine mercy reborn. For a moment, the universe stood still, witnessing not just a beginning, but a second chance. But even as light returned, the memory of that ancient rebellion remained like an echo in the halls of eternity. Lucifer and those who followed him had been cast down. Their brilliance turned to shadow. Once clothed in glory, they became wanderers of the dark, whispering lies into the stillness of creation. And though the earth was remade, their presence lingered, not as victors, but as reminders. That pride, once sown in heaven, would one day find its way into the hearts of men. The story of Genesis is not only about beginnings. It is about God's pattern, to redeem, to restore, and to bring light out of ruin. He could have destroyed everything and started anew from nothing, but he chose instead to renew. That tells us something about his heart. God doesn't abandon what he loves. Even when creation fell into darkness, he didn't turn away. He hovered above the chaos. He waited. He spoke light into existence again. And that same pattern has never changed. When humanity fell, he sent a redeemer. When Israel wandered, he called them back. When the world grew silent under the weight of sin, he came himself, as light wrapped in flesh, to walk among the very beings made in his image. Every act of creation echoes his mercy. Every sunrise retells his story. Every glimmer of hope in our darkest hour whispers the same truth. The light never left. Sometimes we imagine God as distant, high above the stars, watching in silence. But the story of creation tells us the opposite. He is the God who steps into the void. When life feels formless and empty, when everything we build has fallen apart, he hovers over our chaos just as he did in the beginning, patient, present, powerful. And when the time is right, he speaks again, "Let there be light." Look closely at the order of creation. It began not with man, but with light, because before we can understand who we are, we must see who he is. Light comes first, truth before understanding, grace before judgment, love before law. And that light was never just a physical glow. It was the presence of the Word, the same Word that John later revealed as Christ himself. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So when God said, "Let there be light," he wasn't merely creating photons. He was revealing his Son. That means the story of Genesis and the story of Jesus are not two stories. They are one. From the first dawn of creation to the final cross on Calvary, it has always been the same light breaking through the darkness. Lucifer tried to steal it. Sin tried to hide it. Death tried to silence it. But the light of God cannot be destroyed. It can only be revealed again in new forms, in new hearts, through every act of grace that touches his world. Imagine for a moment the Garden of Eden, the air still fresh from creation's breath, the rivers running like liquid glass, and every leaf shimmering beneath the presence of God. It was a sanctuary of peace, the echo of what heaven once was before the fall. And yet, into that peace, a familiar voice found its way back, the same whisper that had once risen in heaven. "I will ascend. I will be like the Most High." Now, it slithered through the branches, tempting man to believe the same lie. You'll be like God. The same seed of pride that cast angels down now took root in human hearts. And once again the light dimmed. But even then, God did not give up. He clothed his children. He made a way. He promised a Redeemer, the seed who would crush the serpent's head, the light that would pierce the deepest shadow. It's as if he was saying, "You have fallen, but I will rise on your behalf." And through every page of Scripture, that promise unfolds. From Noah's ark to Abraham's covenant, from David's throne to Mary's womb. The same God who said, "Let there be light," kept saying it again and again, in every age, in every story, until finally the Word became flesh and said it himself. "I am the light of the world." The story comes full circle. From the darkness before creation to the darkness of the cross, God's answer has always been the same. Light. Light that forgives. Light that restores. Light that cannot be extinguished. And when the stone rolled away from that tomb, it wasn't just the dawn of a new day. It was the same divine light that once broke through the chaos in Genesis, shining again for all eternity. So what does that mean for us? It means your story isn't over. No matter how dark your world feels, no matter how deep the void inside you seems, God is still hovering, still waiting, still whispering your name across the waters. He doesn't see a wasteland. He sees a beginning. He doesn't see a failure. He sees a place to speak light again. And if you let him, he will say over your life what he said in the beginning. Let there be light. Maybe you've been through your own gap, a moment between what was and what could be, a space of silence, confusion, or loss. Remember, God does his best work in the gaps. The gap between Genesis 1 verse 1 and 1:2. The gap between the cross and the resurrection. The gap between your brokenness and your healing. Every gap is an invitation for God to move. And when he does, light always wins. As the final pages of Revelation remind us, there will come a day when night will be no more. No shadows, no pain, no separation. Only the eternal light of the Lamb. And when we see that light face to face, we will finally understand what the first words of Scripture meant all along, that everything began and will end with him, because the story of creation was never just about the making of a world. It was about the revealing of a heart that refused to give up on love, that turned chaos into beauty, and that still whispers to every soul willing to listen, "Let there be light in you." And that light, once spoken into the void, will never go out again.